Welcome to the podcast An Ancient Language for a Modern Soul, Poemi Conviviali by Giovanni Pascoli. In this episode, we will finally hear how Odysseus' last voyage really ends. And I'm here with Professor Francesca Schironi again to continue our conversation about this beautiful poem. And for those who are just tuning in now, Professor Schironi teaches classics at the University of Michigan, and she has written on several very important topics, including the motive of Ulysses' last voyage in modern literature, including Pascoli's version. So you will listen to the second and final part of the poem in various translations. Canto 15 to 23 are taken from the translation by Deborah Brown, Richard Jackson, and Susan Thomas in the book The Last Voyage, published in 2010 by Red Hen Press. But Canto 21 is translated by Tej Silverman, and you can read it on the website of Poetry Foundation under Tej's name. The last canto is from the translation by James Ackers and me, published by Italica Press in 2022. The poem is read by Ali Harmer, accompanied by Mark Harmer at the Celtic harp. So hello again, Francesca, and thank you very much again for being here.
And thank you very much again for inviting me for a second part.
In the poem now, Odysseus and his old companions have finally departed for their voyage backwards, back to the adventures of their youth. And Odysseus, we said, doesn't seek the unknown like in the retelling that Dante provides in Canto 26 of the Divine Comedy, and he is not going home like in Homer. He does, however, revisit many of the places of his first voyage. He goes to the island of Circe, he wants to meet the Cyclops Polyphemus again, and finally he wants to hear the Siren's song again.
So the episode of the Cyclops is the most developed by Pascal, and this is one that attracted my attention as a classicist, because what happens is that so the episode starts with a description of the island of the Cyclops and then with the cave of the Cyclops. And what is interesting is that Pascal fundamentally follows Homer, meaning he really translates line by line the description of Homer, so that any readers will really think to be reading the original, so expecting that the story also goes off exactly like Homer recounts it. And this is where Pascal innovates, because after describing the island and the cave, so everyone thinks, okay, this is it, we are there. Who appears is not the Cyclops, but is a woman with a baby at her breast, who asks him, again using the line that Polyphemus uses, where they come from and what they're looking for. And so Odysseus is taken by surprise, and he thinks that perhaps the Polyphemus has learned civilized life and has taken a wife. So he's asking, okay, where is your husband? Because I met your husband in the past. I knew him, and start recounting the story. But the wife, of course, doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's asking, okay, what are you here for plundering, for taking our goods, which is another quotation from Homer. And then she answers herself and says, no, of course you are not, because you're old, and so you cannot, you don't even have the strength fundamentally to do any plundering, which is the first plunge into reality for Odysseus, because he's old. He's not the hero he remembers to have been, and perhaps he's never been such a hero, but certainly now he's an old man. The husband at a certain point comes back, and again is not Polyphemus. And at this point, Odysseus, who really wants to find the Cyclops, asks him, okay, but where was this Cyclops, so this terrible giant with one eye, and I blinded his eye? And everyone is puzzled. And at a certain point, the husband thinks that perhaps this story is what lies behind an old story that the father of his wife told him that there was, a steep volcano, and the whole of the volcano was red, and so that perhaps might be behind this story of this Cyclops and this giants that Odysseus blinded. So Odysseus gets all excited and he asks, so who drilled his eye in the night? And I'm actually quoting my translation. And the answer of the husband is, to the mountain, the eye drilled nobody. Which again, I think is an very interesting twist with tradition, because as everyone knows, Odysseus told the Cyclops that his name was Utis, nobody, so that when he blinded him, the Cyclops could not ask for help, saying, nobody blinded me. But here, of course, the nobody has a totally different meaning, because it's simply saying, the story does not exist, you're just a crazy old man. And then Odysseus flies, goes away, leaves the island, and goes in search of the truth, the story, the song of the sun, and that even in Homer is this song that tells a lot of things that men don't know and everyone wants to hear, but is a very dangerous song because, ship crash onto the rocks. And this is exactly what happens to Odysseus, but this time, even in a worse. Remember, in the original, Odysseus asked companions for them to completely, isolate their ears with wax so that they cannot hear, whereas he wants to hear, but is bound to the mast of the boat, so that he cannot, try to reach them because they're dangerous. Here, instead, Odysseus hears everything and crashes on the rocks, but hears actually nothing. He simply crashes on the rocks, asking one last question, which is, tell me at least who I am and why I was. So this quest for his past, for his identity. So this voyage is a failed quest, and as we were saying, that is a desire that are never fulfilled, is definitely part of this poem, because he's desiring to know his past, himself. Some people say that Circe stands for love. This episode of the Polyphemus is glory, and the last one is truth. And none of these quests is successful. So it's a very pessimistic poem, I would say.
Yes, exactly. So 3 goals of desire are not fulfilled here, the major goals of humankind. And it's a very interesting retelling, if you like, that Pascoli does of the Odyssey and the Divine Comedy. And I think we can see here like his own imprint, like his own biographical and poetical imprint onto the story of Odysseus.
Absolutely, and I mean, at least this is the way I've read it. I'm not the only one who have read it in this way, but one thing that struck me is and this is in the first part, when he sails with his friends, which we discussed about. These are companions that somehow are alive again, but what he does is that he lives without telling his wife and his son. He just escapes. So he's eloping, betraying his family. And again, first of all, this is different, for example, from what happens in Tennyson and other poets to discuss this and took up the same idea of the last voyage. There is always a moment when Odysseus greets his family, which is denied in the last voyage by Pascoli. And exactly, knowing Pascoli in this biography, Pascoli was someone who, as we know, remained extremely attached to his original family. He lived with his sister. There is a lot been a speculation of him not wanting to get married, not wanting to leave his house, being really attached in a very peculiar way to this sister. But certainly family is central in the poetics of Pascoli. So the fact that you have this Odysseus that doesn't care about abandoning his family for something that turns out to be a failed quest, nothing at all. I wonder whether there is this sense of Odysseus has been also not a model, someone that, has this hope that and abandons the only tangible thing that he has, which is family. And again, it might be that I'm too much into thinking about this myth from other modern authors who certainly turn Odysseus into a negative model, but I wonder whether this also might be something that can be explored further, that it's a deluded man, is someone who thinks that life is elsewhere, whereas his life is actually in Ithaca with his family, and he doesn't care about abandoning it.
That's a
And of
very
course, then there is also the poetics of Pascal, and this is another way to read this poem, not in a biographical way, but as a poetical statement, because again, there is this famous of Pascal, we call it la poetica del fanciullino, the poetics of the little child, which is this idea that to make poetry, you have to go back to your childhood, which again is still biographical, because again, this attachment of his original family is still part of, I'm a little child and I want to stay with my family. But this little child has the advantage of being able to see nature and the world around him with fresh eyes, with no bias, with no layers or cultural layers, and that we all have when we grow up, which is great because this is what makes the poetry of Pascoli great. But of course, when we are talking about reception and an idea of poetics that is a continuous dialogue with the past, becomes extremely critical of this type of poetics, because fundamentally what Pascal is saying, he actually says that when he writes about his poetics, that we have made up, our tradition reading the Latins, and the Latins had made their own tradition reading the Greeks, and there is this, baggage in a sense that we have, which he doesn't seem to, which is of course Pascal is extremely learned in a sense, but he disguised this baggage when he writes poetry. But so what he writes is poetry is not made with books. Of course, poetry is made with books, but the ability of Pascal is to somehow make whatever he does in a way that it sounds like is a little child speaking. But as I was saying before, with this, intertextuality with the Odyssey in the Polyphemus episode, clearly points to the fact that he's extremely learned, but in a sense is extremely innovative in turning the episode of the last voyage, elaborated by Homer in a certain way, by Dante in a certain way, in a totally different direction. So this, I would say, is detachment from the tradition.
Yes, that's
That
Pascoli's
with a little child.
On take on it, yes. And so the last question for me would be, because I think now listeners are quite curious to hear the story of the Cyclops from Pascoli's voice. But were there any creative responses to Pascoli's poem?
What is quite interesting that at the time when Pascoli writes around this poem, around the same period, we have a series of other, because, so just to give you a sense, and this is not responses, of course, after Tennyson, who writes the Ulysses in 1842, you have Graf Last Voyage, which is 1897. Then we have D'Annunzio in Maya, also have another Ulysses that goes in a last voyage, is 1903, which is the year before the last voyage of Pascoli. Then we have a response to D'Annunzio by Gozzano in the Hypothesis, in where clearly it goes against this, super mystic Odysseus of D'Annunzio. So what I'm saying is that this is a poem, a myth that elicits a series of responses around a certain period of time. Pascoli writes in that period. As far as I'm aware, I didn't notice any response, for example, in Gozzano, who probably knew this poem. what we have then are later reworking, and by later I mean after World War One or World War Two, in fact, in two of them, in which is not again a direct response. So Pascal is not quoted, but is a different way of dealing with this search of truth. Because in a sense, what Pascal has is this man who asks who I am, what am I, how was my past, was my life spent well, which is an existential question that is, I think, responded by Dalla Piccola. Dalla Piccola writes an opera, which is Ulisse, in 1968. He clearly acknowledges plenty of influences in the preface of the librettos. There is also Pascoli, but there are many others. But one thing that caught my eye is that, of course, it's an opera, it's very reduced, but there is an episode which is placed in Hades, and there Odysseus asks, who am I? What am I searching for? Which, in a sense, is echoing the last question of Odysseus in the last voyage. The ending of this opera is very ambiguous. This Odysseus is another one who also wants to search, to travel, to find wonder in life. And at the end, and I'm just again quoting, there is this end, he said, if a voyage could break the silence, the mystery, Lord, my heart and the sea are not alone any longer. So there is this Lord with what this Lord is, we don't know. It might be God, it might be just a spiritual answer, spirituality.
Agree.
Something in line with a spiritual fulfillment, which in any case is a positive end, because this is not alone any longer. Whereas, the other Odysseus or Pascoli were just, dying, asking a question without receiving any answer. The latest responses are two that are different, very different. One is Savinio, Capitan Ulysses, of 1934, and the other is Malerva, Ithaca Forever, much more recent novel, 1997. They are very different, but they have something that is common, which is that in both cases, Odysseus refuses to embark in a last voyage, saying, I'm fed up of this tradition. This is in the case of Savinio. And in case of Malerva, and this is, I think, is a good conclusion, this Odysseus is still tempted to go away once he sees a ship off the coast of Ithaca. So he's actually trying to attract the attention of the sailors to be invited. But then when he sees the ship approaching, he decides to let it go and to stay in Ithaca forever, the title of the novel. And it turns out that he decides to write down his memory, and fundamentally is actually Homer, is seen as Homer. So in a sense, this is a recuperation of the tradition. So whereas, Pascoli denied, in a sense, the tradition, what you have with Malerba, I think, is, an Odysseus that actually finds his memory and puts together one of the most beautiful poems we've ever had.
Wow, this is fascinating. I was not aware of the authors that you quoted, and now I really want to read them or listen to them, because one of them is an opera, as you said. And so this was a great conversation, Francesca, and I want to let the listeners enjoy the last part of the last voyage. Thank you very much, Francesca, again. And to the listeners, thank you for listening to this podcast.
Thank you very much to you, Elena, for inviting me.
15. The Storm. And the ship sailed for 9 days above the waves, its course hastened night and day by winged oars, for Odysseus had broken the famed crew into 2 groups of 10, and one group slept while the other took the oars. At dawn of the 10th day, a soft wind scattered roses into the sky. He lifted a spruce from the deck and, setting it into the mast hole, he contrived a device to raise the crooked sail with a leather halyard and drew the bow stays taut around the pins on the wing of the stern. The wind tore the sail in half, and the waves crashed around the hull of the boat, so they tied sheets the length of the swift-running ship, and in the middle of the deck, Iro, the beggar, set an amphora of wine, cut into it with a billhook, and distributed the contents, bringing laughter to the seated mariners. And for 9 days upon the waves, both pilot and wind kept on course. On the 10th, dawn broke through the clouds, and when night came, a violent storm made 3 or 4 tears in the sail, and Odysseus lowered the sail and ordered them all to rush to oars, and they bent themselves to hard rowing. And for 9 days they moved backwards against the waves in deadly winds. At last, at nightfall, the winds and waves calmed, and they saw shore. At this, the old hero pushed the ship forward into a bay calm as a bed, and they, overpowered by weariness, slept on the beach, pounded by waves. But Odysseus did not sleep. Though he was overcome by exhaustion, he believed in his heart they had arrived at Circe's island. He saw the house of polished stone as though in a dream, and the waking of sleepy lions, their red mouths in open yawns, their tails beginning to slash, and the great atrium resounding with the song of the weaver. Now Odysseus spoke. "Terpius, Phemius, are you asleep? Listen to me. The sweet and forgotten dream is moving inside me. It is love that is stirring me now, like a storm almost over." And that's what he said. And in the deep calm night the wind slept, and the pale sickle moon finally rose in nearby woods and forests, carrying the perfume of great open cups of flowers which never had or would be seen. And the great sea remembered him again, and with long white surges it heaved its sobbing foam upon the shore. "16. The island of Aea. And with the rosy light of dawn, the island of Circe appeared to him. And Odysseus said to Phemius the bard, son of Terpius, 'Greatly esteemed poet, come accompany me on your lyre, so the goddess can hear your song of mortality, and you can teach us her song of immortality.' He said to Iro, his steward of food supplies, 'You and the others stay close to the grey sea. Eat and drink, she cannot touch you with her wand. Eat no more acorns, and break your food in pieces, weeping in another voice, Iro, not Iro.' He said this smiling, and moving through the woods and brush with the sweet poet, and he saw the pass where the tall stag with horns like branches came down the slope to drink. But he did not see the tall house of Circe. So he said to the highly esteemed poet, 'It is there, in back of us, a storm that we wished for, giving wind to our feet, but misting over our eyes.' He knew the place where the god Hermes confronted him, and he recognized the little hill where he could dig up the right herb, the one with the black roots and a flower like milk. He didn't see the tall house of Circe, so the highly esteemed poet said, 'It is there, in front of us. Old age brings steady nerves if you are tired, and it is not too advanced.' And they continued through mountains and valleys, through woods and forest, alert to the sound of the yawns of lions awakened by their passing, or the immortal song of the weaver, the singing goddess. And he heard nothing on the deserted island, nor did he see anything move, and the sun plunged from the sky, and a star-filled darkness fell. And the hero said to the greatly esteemed poet, "The stars are too high in the heavens for me to see the way from now on. So let us sleep here, and the bed we make will be cold, since the wind has risen again." He said this, and they both lay down among the many fallen leaves heaped around the trunk of the ancient oaks during the storm. And in the pile of leaves there appeared 2 smoking embers, old but still alive, and with a little bit of fire left in the dead grey ash. And here the heart of the hero heard a roar of lions that slept in the daytime, so surely they could sense the house was very close. This feeling was made more certain by the clear voice in the distance of the goddess who, alone, never went to sleep, but wove all night. Nor did he, Odysseus, go to sleep at all, but he tossed and turned the whole night in his rough bed of leaves. "17. Love. With the rosy light of the dawn, the roaring of the lions, who, weary at last, slept with their muzzles stretched out along their paws, was no longer heard. The goddess also, pale herself, slept alone in the well-known bed as dawn grew lighter. And the old hero spoke to the old poet. "Everyone has his own life, that's it. But I will give a sign with the lyre, poet, to you who keep a pure heart at a distance. But if I find again what my heart wishes for, I will send you a sign of war, as once I did, which means I will have thrown myself again into a horrendous fray, and that I, the hero of bronze, stand above the naked dead. That your heart will understand even at a distance." So he spoke, and the silence of the lions and the goddess was all one heard in the dead of night. And each one went his own way, through woods and forests, mountains and valleys, and the hero heard nothing, unless it was an odd squall roaring in the oaks, or the eternal distant song of the sea. And he did not see the house, or the lions asleep, with their muzzles on their paws, or his own goddess. But the sun is setting, and already all the roots are shadowed. He had sent forth a sign of war to bring back to the old poet, and listened closely to any sound the ear might hear, and heard at last the song of the lyre. Yes, heard it, as he approached, always sadder, always sweeter, to sing of love that sleeps in the heart. The sound came closer, but he sees nothing. Then sees in the thick heap of dead leaves the dead poet, now moving along the surface invisibly among poplars and willows that give him their fruits, and the dead fingers that touch the lyre again, the wind. So the song will be sad and far away and empty. But high up there was the branch of an oak, the perfect lyre, in which the notes will hang, where Phemius, dying, placed it, to cry out to the hero, to the sun shining, and the wind singing, to the wind which shortens trees, to the wind which carried a single sob from the sea. And the hero cried, as night began on the ship, after he had abandoned the dead, sweet poet, above whom the wind moved dry leaves and a golden lyre. "18. Island of the Goats. Afterwards, they sailed further and sadder, and for 9 days travelled over the waves, now with oars, now with a full white sail. They finally arrived at a wild island without any people that fed only goats. Overcome by sleep and fatigue, they slept on a beach battered by waves. But with the rosy light of dawn, Odysseus saw the land of the Cyclops, not very near nor far away, and it reminded him of the boast he made to the gigantic man-eater about his strength and cleverness. But forgetting this, he sought the poet to tell him. "Turpius, Phemius, I have dreamed again the sweet forgotten dream, the one about glory." The expressive poet was asleep on the harsh rustling leaves, and his sadness sang to the wind about sweet love sleeping in one's heart that leaves as soon as it is awakened. The hero said to his old oarsmen, "Comrades, listen. There's nothing here but goats, and we could fill ourselves up on meat until the sun goes down. But no, I want to take from the shepherd the sheep and the goats. This would be better." The crown of a rustic hat appeared, that of the shepherd. "I blinded him, but that great heart has not paid me back. He implored the Father for me to lose my comrades in the return journey, for me to sail badly and in the boats of others and late. Now he knows that I have comrades, that I am sailing in my own ship on my return. So let's go. At the sea we shall find a cave I know well, all covered in laurel. If only I still had my divine poet. I would like the song of Odysseus to be sung inside the cave, so that when the Cyclops, so huge his chin rests on the top of pines, enters the cave, he will remain in the dark listening to this song with the flocks all around, and I will sit in the shade on the beach." He said this, telling his patient comrades to go untie the mooring. Then they got on board, lined up at the oarlocks, making white caps with their oars. They arrived quickly, going by sea to the top of the deep cave covered with laurel, and hidden inside by a rough covering of tall pines and oaks, which seemed like long flowing hair. The old hero spoke again. "So then, let us land right here, so he won't see us approach by rowing. Only this boulder, which cut off the top of this dark hill, but only with the orbs of his eyes and his sense of smell, he won't attack us as before when a breaking wave crashed against the bow." Then he showed them the tall mountain, cut off at the top, that rose by itself. "19. The Cyclops. So he told his companions to stay near the ship and to watch over it, and he had already moved toward the cave alone to see the Cyclops, but not be seen, as the shining flocks covered the mountain. Then Iro the beggar spoke to the hero. "I would really like to see that man who eats so much, and to carry away, if I can, some intestines already cleaned for sausage, and some lamb to stuff it full. For your Iro is hungry, and if the great Cyclops is within the cave, you know Iro is very fast, though not very brave, and like the angry sky that comes, he flees on foot with the wind." The hero smiled, and the two of them climbed, the beggar and the hero, until they reached the cave. Cyclops wasn't there. They went up the mountain covered with flocks, and the two of them marvelled at seeing baskets filled with cheeses, and overflowing with lamb, and with goat skins also filled, and everything was laid out, everything was there, first courses, middle courses, later courses. And from one of the fences that stood there, with a child to her breast, there was a high-waisted woman who said, Guests, be joyful. Who are you? Where are you from? Are you here to trade? But the hero beyond the fence, with the beggar, glanced around at food already baking in the sun. If the meal was already eaten and we are too late, it would be rude to ask to be fed. Smiling to Iro, the old hero says, "Hostess, equal joy also to you. But how should a man approaching honour these lucky men, and to know now their customs, because they always live in a cave and leave their tracks on the rough mountain?" And the high-waisted woman responded, "Guest, everyone is the law in his own house, and of his wife, and his children, and possessions. But we do not plunder others, yet those on the black ships who are too proud, like thieves, have plundered our sheep, our goats. Others think only evil, and so they risk their lives. But you are old, and seek a gift, not plunder." The old hero winked at Iro, then said, "Hostess, I know him well, this Cyclops, and as the host, he should find me a gift." And at this they heard a great trembling and bleating approaching, and a sound of bagpipes. And trembling, the black sheep scatter, and no force can hold back the cry of the sheep and the goats. And then Cyclops, with a great crash, dropped an enormous bundle of wood outside and thundered into the cave, and Iro hid, shaking, on the ground. Fame. The man entered, and the high-waisted woman came toward him, followed by many sons, and by many sheep and goats pushing against each other, making it hard for the small ones. But finally, with bleats and cries, a great clamour, each one found and sucked its own mother's teats, wagging its tail. And the man saw the old hero and wondered secretly if this was the famous Odysseus, and spoke to him in winged words. "Welcome, eat. We don't have much to offer you." And to the shepherd the old hero responds, "Thank you, humble one. I come from far away, too far away. Still, I already know from the song of the wandering poets about this cave. I know all about a great giant of a man who lived savagely with an extraordinary white herd, who came alone over the mountains like a great peak himself, with a round eye." And the shepherd answered the old hero, "I came from within the earth myself, many years ago, and saw nothing of a gigantic man." And the hero resumed, while young men stood around the shepherd listening. "This one only had one round eye on his forehead, like a bronze shield, like the sun, inflamed and empty. There was a pine log for a catapult, the highest of the mountains made of stone, and he hurled it into the sea, which resounded with an enormous crash." But the shepherd, with all of the other shepherds, considered and said to his wife, "Maybe this is what your father was talking about. He was a wise man, as good and as grand as you, Telemu Eurymedes' son, an old prophet who said that stones once rained into the sea, from the mountain that was the highest of all of the mountains, and the booming was heard during the whole night, and on its peak an eye would appear, round and full of fire." And the shepherd told him to be quick. "And his eye, who put it out in the night with a stake?" And the shepherd replied to Odysseus, "On a mountain? An eye? A stake? No, I have never heard or seen anything. Sometimes a ship comes from somewhere else, but not bringing trouble." He spoke, and from the background Iro came forward. "You do not have young men to help you. Take me. I'm well, if old, and no one has faster feet than I do when I have to search for the lamb and chase after the goat. For a shepherd who's never had shelter, a cave is good. I will be your assistant. "21. The Sirens. From there he sailed farther on, and sadder. Standing at the stern, he looked out darkly till the Cyclops' land turned slowly into view. He saw the island's unfarmed peak that rose up sharp and high as if to mark itself apart, and watched a fire's smoke unfold from where a shepherd lulled it. But those who bent to pull the oars saw shadows on the bruise of sea, the shadows of those Cyclops, as still along the shore as if they, too, were hills. The old man heard his heart beat like the yelping of a dog asleep. My dream was neither more nor any less than what it was, a dream, and wind, and smoke from burning wood, but truth is the only good." He spoke thus to himself, and then remembered the two sirens with their slope of petalled meadow in the calm of sea. Again he heard their honeyed song. "Men, stop your ship. There's no one on the earth who passes by without first coming near, and no one who has listened without loving what he hears, nor does he turn away without perceiving more. We know of all that happens on your worldly shores." And then again remembering, he understood that Circe would have envied him the only precious thing, knowing. It's what she must have longed for in her den of spells and beasts. But humankind, endowed with thought, has always been compelled to stop, to listen in, although he'd lose his home and friends, although his bones would glisten in their withered shell of skin. The hero, who was old now, turned to all his old and awe-bound men. "Let's sail toward the only good, the singing of the sirens. I want to hear their sound without the ropes around my wrists, to raise my white-haired head as if a sail for the ship, to lift it up, released, and know the whole of what will happen from the siren's lips." With this, he roused the hearts of those who beat the water back with oars. He'd sparked in them that same pure thirst to know the earth. If vines on terraced rock had brought forth fruit this year, if someone's cow had given birth, how much the neighbour's crops were worth, and if his wife were weaving now, or walking toward the well. "22. Along the way. And now he came to the island of lotuses, and there were men and women sitting along the shore, sated with lotus in a state of sweet oblivion. And they rose, offering the faithful old oarsman that flower as food. O men wandering the seas, it is time now for you to eat the honey of oblivion. The ship passes, and their sleepy cries vanish softly through the forgetful skies. And so they arrive at the stone island of the Lestrygonians, and on its cliffs were giants placed as sentinels, and they rained heavy rocks down onto the ship, which shattered with a great crash. And the ship goes on to the island of the dead, and women and men lay around on the banks of the ocean's river, sated with life under willows and poplars. They looked and saw on the ship sons older than themselves, and then, moved by pity for the oarsmen, moaned, "Come and take your rest. It is time." The ship had barely passed on when the lifeless murmuring disappeared. And then it came to the island of the sun, and the young bulls, black ones and white ones, grazed in the pastures tended by goddesses. The men heard the cattle lowing in the golden light, and with great effort they steered the ship clear. And they arrived at Aeolus's island of the wind. On top of a wall of impenetrable bronze, he saw a guard of 7 sons and 7 daughters, and they saw the ship, and in the light its pilot appeared at first to be a swan or a stork, but one of them recognised Odysseus, who was old enough to defy the winds, and with just one whistle they descended from the slippery rocks to the old hero. And now the angry winds carried them forward for days and nights toward the wandering cliffs, where they arrived so abruptly that they almost smashed against those sharp and treacherous rocks, but then slipped through like a swift arrow. And then a violent change of wind threw them against Charybdis and Scylla. And now the hero heard Scylla yelping like a nervous dog, howling at the moon, and he heard the rumbling boil of Charybdis like a cauldron on a raging fire. And the 12 arms of Scylla menaced them, and Charybdis gulped down the salty water. In vain. The ship had already passed on through. And the winds turned around toward their home, surrounded by bronze, muttering darkly among themselves in anger. And the ship came into a deep calm, without the slightest breeze, breathless, and perhaps there was some god who hovered over the sea and lulled the waves to sleep. The Truth. And there was a flowering garden in the sea, in a sea glossy as the sky, and a song of 2 sirens did not resound yet, because the meadow was distant. And the old hero felt a strong premonition, a current running in the calm sea, pushing the boat toward the sirens, and he told the men to raise their oars. "The ship turns away from them now, friends, but don't worry that the roar of the rowing disturbs the songs of the sirens. By now we should hear them. Listen to the song calmly, your arms on the oarlocks." And the current, running quiet and smooth, pushes the ship forward more and more. And the godlike Odysseus sees at the top of the blooming island the sirens, stretched out among the flowers, heads erect, upright on idle elbows, watching the rosy sun rising across from them, watching, motionless, and their long shadows were stripes across the island of flowers. "Are you sleeping? The dawn has passed already. Already eyes under the delicate brows look for the sun. Sirens, I am still mortal. I heard you, but I could not stop." And the current ran on, quiet and smooth, pushing the ship forward more and more. And the old man sees the 2 sirens, their eyebrows raised high above their pupils, gazing straight ahead at the fixed sun, or at him in his black ship. And over the unchanging calm of the sea, a voice rises from him, deep and sure. "I am he. I've returned to learn. I am here as you see me now. Yes, all that I see in the world regards me, questions me, asks me what I am. And the current ran on, quiet and smooth, pushing the ship forward more and more. And the old man sees a great pile of bones, men's bones, and shriveled skin near them, close to the sirens, stretched out, motionless on the shore like two reefs. I see. Let it be. You may be innocent, but how much this hard pile of bones has grown. Speak, you two. Tell me the truth, to me alone of all men, before I doubt that I have lived. And the current ran on, quiet and smooth, pushing the ship forward more and more. And the ship thrust itself high and above the brows of the two sirens, while their fixed eyes looked on. I will have but a moment, I beg you, at least tell me what I am, what I will be. And between the two reefs, the ship was shattered. "24. Calypso. And the blue sea that loved him pushed him further for 9 days and nights to that far remote island, to the cave whose entrance blooms with grapes and twisted vine leaves, and all around a dense dark wood of alder trees and cypress trees, where hawks and owls and crows nested, and no one else alive, neither God nor man, had ever set foot. Sometimes, in the thick of leaves, was a frantic flutter of hawk wings. Owls hooted from the hollow trees. On the boughs, the chatty crows talked of what happened on the sea. In her house, she wove and sang by the cedar-perfumed fire. A sudden bustle startled her, and she said to herself, I hear the crows talk, and the owls hoot, and wings flutter in the leaves. Have they seen, perhaps, a god flying like a merganser over the barren waves of ocean, leaving no trail, like the wind on fields of violet and celery? May their words not reach my ears. The gods have spurned Calypso, the lonely hider, I know that, since I sent my love back to his sea and sorrow. What do you see, round-eyed owls and chatty crows? Her golden spool in her hand, she left her house and looked out. A man lay there on the sand and near the cave, still gently rocked by the last wave, still nodding with his white head knowingly. A vine branch hung on him with its bunch of grapes. The sea had brought Odysseus back to her, but as a corpse in the arms of the lonely hider on that remote island greening in the navel of the eternal sea. He was naked, he who had refused the immortal clothes of the goddess, frail, white, and trembling in death. He who had refused eternal youth. And she wrapped him up in the cloud of her hair, and she howled at the sea where nobody could hear her. Unborn and immortals live less, but also die less than a life which ends.